Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my video, and today we're going to be doing a tier list of every single 5-star DPS in Genshin up until version 4.8, so this is a before NATLAN tier list, and today we are concerned with how good they are to invest into if you're free to play. What I mean by that is we're going to be considering their strength at C0, R0, as well as whether they rely on any specific teammates, are their team comps expensive, do they need a lot of C6 4 stars, are they easy to build, how reliant are they on 5-star weapons, do they have any F2P alternatives? That's what we are concerned with today. So this isn't necessarily a strength tier list, it's an F2P investment tier list. But with all that being said, let us start off our tier list, and first of all we have Diluc. Obviously used to be considered the strongest DPS in the game when the game released, but nowadays I would put Diluc at a C tier. The reason being there's just so many good pirate DPS in the game right now. I mean, you've got Arlecchino, Hu Tao, Linny, Yoimiya, that honestly, Diluc just can kind of struggle to keep up. Now, I do know that he does have his best in slot team nowadays, which is Shenyun and Farina, which is actually a pretty decent team. But the problem is, Farina is a pretty wanted character, Shenyun is a pretty niche support, probably works a bit better with the likes of Zhao, and also Hu Tao, who is just a better power DPS than Diluc. So I am going to put him in the C tier because neither his premium team is the most F2P friendly, and there are just better alternatives to Diluc nowadays which are worth investing into. And on that note, moving on to our other 1.0 standard character, it is going to be Keqing. Now, unfortunately for Keqing, I am going to put her in the D tier. Now, I know some people will say, she's good in Dendro teams, you can play her in Aggravate, which is true. Just the problem is when it comes to Aggravate teams, you can play both Electro and Dendro in them. And even if you're looking at only Electro specifically, Clorind is just a stronger Electro DPS. Raiden also can be played as an Electro DPS, whether it be in Aggravate teams or her Raiden national team. And then you do also have Sino, who is just a bit better than Keqing nowadays, so honestly I wouldn't really bother investing into Keqing nowadays, so I am going to put her in the D tier. And unfortunately when it comes to our first limited character, Klee, I am also going to be putting her in the D tier, even below Diluc. Her main team is the Mono Pyro team, which Linny is just straight up better than her in. You can play her in vape teams, but the likes of Diluc are just better than her. And she is just really clunky to play as well. So because she has like less team diversity than Diluc and is arguably weaker, I am going to put her in the D tier. However, I will say these are going to be our only D tier characters, and luckily we don't have an F tier. So, it could be worse for these two. But moving on, we have Childe, who, is still a pretty decent DPS to this day. Now, I am going to put Childe in the B tier. I know some people will say, oh, he's like speedrunner's favorite character or whatever. And the thing is, Childe's best team is affordable for F2Ps, that obviously being the Xiangling Bennett core, and then you can play one of Sucrose or Kaza in there, which makes a very good team. Just the problem with that team is that, Childe really enjoys vertical investing, and he can also be a bit of a struggle to build because you do have to manage his ER requirements for his burst, which is a pivotal part of his rotation alongside crit rate, crit damage. And he can be a bit harder to build because he doesn't have crit ascension. His best in slot artifact set's a bit up in the air. Some people say he's better to run with 2Ps, or 4Ps Heart of Depth, or the other Hydra 4Piece set, which, just can make him a bit of a pain to build. And there's also just characters where they can get similar results with Bennett Xiangling, just much easier than Childe. So, although Childe is still a decent DPS, I wouldn't put him higher than the B tier nowadays, especially if you have him at C0 or R0. But moving on, we have Ganyu, and actually what I want to do is I actually want to consider all of the cryo DPS at the same time, just because the way they interact is really interesting, and also just because they all kind of get screwed over in the same way by the cryo element and game design, which I will move on to in a second. But when it comes to the characters and their placements, Ayaka is better than Ganyu when it comes to freeze teams, definitely. However, Ganyu can be played in melt and burn melt teams, whereas Ayaka can't really. Although I'd say the problem for Ganyu is that those can be a bit clunky and hard to play. They are just easier to play with Wriothesley, and I'd say arguably Wriothesley is more consistent in those burn melt teams. So yeah, honestly what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to put Ayaka and Wriothesley in the B tier, whilst I put Ganyu in the C tier, which honestly pains me because I love all of the cryo DPS in this game. Cryo is actually my favorite element in the game, but cryo itself just has a bit of a problem. I mean, first of all, you have the game design when it comes to Spiral Abyss, where nowadays the chambers have more, enemies you can't freeze, or which are a bit spread out, harder to freeze. It can just be a bit annoying to play freeze nowadays, so Ayaka has lost a lot of kind of her space in the meta when it comes to that, just because freeze is less viable nowadays. And honestly, also just the cryo element in general holds these guys back, because before Dendro released, cryo's kind of main thing, which kept it in the meta even if you couldn't freeze enemies, was that it was really good against Electro and Hydro shields. But nowadays, Dendro just does both Electro and Hydro shields better than cryo. And their other use would be Pyro Shields, but we just have so many strong Hydro main and sub DPS that, you know, Cryo doesn't really have a niche nowadays. And alongside Freeze falling off, yeah, it's just a bit rough for these characters. I mean, obviously Ryze could be higher if he wasn't so reliant on his C1, but just because he lacks a bit of quality of life and his damage would be much better if you have him C1, I am going to put him in the B tier. And then, you know, Ayaka just not being as prevalent in the meta nowadays as she used to be. She is still a very strong unit at her core, but just because of her stronger defined use cases, I'm going to put her in the B tier now, unfortunately. And then Ganyu just lags behind these characters slightly for me, which honestly is a massive shame because, like I said, I love all three of these characters. But from one set of characters that I love to another, we are going to be moving on to Zhao. Now, Zhao has gotten a lot of new teammates and buffs kind of retroactively thanks to all his new teams, but I'm still going to be putting Zhao in the B tier because although he can be like the strongest AoE DPS in the game, like literally he is like Nivelet levels at his best team, that best team does require C6 Farazan, which can be a pain to get. Mine's only C2. And then he also really wants Shenyan and Farina. And you know, that is just a really expensive team. You know, like I said, we're looking at him C0, R0, and not his premium team because it's just way too expensive. And you know, he does have some alternatives like Thrilling Tail Sucrose, Zhongli for the Anima Red Shred, Jean who you can pair with Farina. You can also run Bennett for the attack buff. But just without his premium team, Zhao lacks just that extra bit of damage that really pushes him over the line, as well as some quality of life because you might need to battery him, or you might need to stay in Bennett's circle. So Zhao can just be a bit annoying if you don't have his premium team. In his premium team, I would put him up there as an A tier character, but unfortunately I'm not going to be considering that, so I will have Zhao in the B tier. And then he also can have some annoyances in his gameplay when it comes to, you know, high poison, knocking back enemies. So yeah, Zhao is going to be in the B tier for me. But moving up, we have Hu Tao, who used to be our strongest pyro DPS in the game. Now it's arguable whether Arlecchino has power crafted, but me personally, I'm going to put Hu Tao in the A tier. Now, some people will say, oh, you know, Hu Tao isn't an A tier, it's C0, R0. You need her signature weapon, you need her C1, which honestly, I just don't think is true. Jump cancelling works very well with Hu Tao, I've been doing it for a long time. And then, you know, Dragon's Bane is still a pretty decent option for Hu Tao, or you could just go for something like White Tassel. And, you know, she is just a very strong character. There's a reason she's still considered a top DPS in the game. Her damage in single target is just absurdly good. And, you know, you may want to say, you know, she relies a lot on double Hydra, so she doesn't have much team flexibility, which is a bit true. Her teams are more strict than other characters in this game. She technically does have alternatives. You know, you can do some Viridescent variants alongside Vape, so you can run like Kaza in her team, but those are a bit more complex and a bit more specialist teams, so I'm not really going to be considering those too much. But Hu Tao is just so strong in her main team. Pair her with like Xingqiu and a Yelan, and then just run even a Shielder. You don't need something overly complicated. Then you have a very comfortable and very strong team, which definitely keeps up in single target nowadays. Hu Tao can destroy bosses in this game. And obviously she does have a premium team with Shenyan Farina, but you know, like kind of similar to Zhao, you know, that is definitely a premium team, so I don't want to consider it too much, so I am just going to be sticking with Hu Tao in the A tier, in my opinion, the second strongest pyro DPS in the game. But next up, we have our only physical unit here, and that is going to be Eula. Now, there's just not much space for physical in the meta nowadays. You know, she does want C6 Mika and Raiden as a battery and to buff up her ult damage, but honestly, there just isn't much of a place for physical damage in the game nowadays. You know, she can be a bit annoying in multi-wave content, so yeah, I'm just going to quickly move on. Eula just doesn't have much of a use nowadays. Kind of similar to Freeze, but in an even worse situation, so yeah, I'm just going to put Eula in the C tier. And next up, we have another pyro DPS, in case you can't tell just how many, because there's already 4 on our list. And Yoimiya, I'm going to put kind of at the top of C tier. You know, I do definitely think she is better than Diluc. Her best team isn't as strict as Diluc's premium team. You can technically run a C6 Yunjin with her, but I think it is just easier to run her with like a Yelan, a Xingqiu, and then just a Shielder like Zhongli or something. And you know, she's definitely easy to play. She does have some quality of life. You know, she's a range unit, so you don't have to go chasing after enemies, which is especially nice against units like Thunder Manifestation. But again, there's just so many good pyro DPS in the game that I can't really put Yoimiya higher than a C tier, so sorry Yoimiya mains, but yeah, C tier. But moving on, we have Raiden, who for a good time was actually considered the strongest DPS in the game, especially at C2, but we are looking at C0, R0. Now obviously she does have the catch, which is a very nice free-to-play weapon for her, but there are just other electro DPS, mainly Clarin, who I would consider stronger. You know, she does have some decent quality of life, especially for her team, that being the Raiden national team, which is easier to play than the child national team. It's still pretty good in single target, even at C0. And technically you can play her in aggravate teams. Now you can play her as the Hyper Bloom trigger in Hyper Bloom teams, but I'm not really considering that since that isn't really a DPS role. But yeah, Raiden is still a decent DPS in the game. I'd say beat her is probably fair. But next up we have Ito, who used to be the strongest Geo DPS in the game, but nowadays, you know, Ito restricted to Mono Geo, reliant on C6 Goro. You know, there is a flex slot, so you can put in like a Bennett in there. You know, technically C6 Goro plus Zhongli isn't, or like Albedo or Chiori isn't the most premium team. So, I mean, rather the most expensive team. So I am still gonna put Ito in the B tier. You can run him with White Blind, but unfortunately, I just don't think he is the strongest Geo DPS nowadays, so I am going to put him in the B tier. You know, if he gets any future supports, that's nice for him, but the problem is if there ever is another Geo Mono DPS which comes out, then Ito is unfortunately just going to fall down in the pecking order. So yeah, Ito has been dealt a bit of an unfortunate hand. He is still a decent DPS. If you don't like Navia, then you can go for Ito for that Geo slot. But I also don't think Geo is that necessary of an element to have coverage for, so I am going to leave Ito in the B tier. And next up we have Aito, who I actually think is a pretty underrated character. Aito does have quite a few teams. He's one of the most flexible units in the game. You do have his Vape teams, which are pretty popular, but honestly my two favorite teams for her are number one, a Hyper Bloom team with Nahida, Fischl, and Beta, which is a fairly affordable team and definitely gets the job done and has both AoE, I meant Beidou Cookie in AoE, and then you can run Fischl Cookie in single target. So, you know, he does have some options. You do also have mono Hydra teams. There is also an AoE and single target variant. You know, for AoE, you could go for like Xingqiu, Yelan, and then Sucrose or Kaza. And then for single target, you can go for a Farina, Yelan, and Jean variant. So yeah, Aito just has a lot of teams, and I definitely do feel like he gets underrated. He's decent in both AoE, single target. I'd say he is smack dab like a B tier character. He is like the definition of a B tier character, if you ask me, which isn't bad. I'd say he's pretty decent, although you are probably better off pulling, you know, Neverlet, because he is just a premium 5-star DPS, unfortunately. But moving on, we have the 3.0 standard character, Tighnari, who I am also going to put in the B tier. He is the only other Dendro DPS other than Alhaitham. He also does get a bit underrated. You know, his single target is pretty good. And you know, he is also not that difficult to build. You can run him on Wanderers or Deepwood or 2-piece sets. You know, you can run him on Stringless or Slingshot because he doesn't need attack as much as he needs EM. So yeah, I'd say he's not too bad of a character. The problem with Tighnari is that if we do get a Dendro DPS in NATLAN, which we probably will because we didn't get a Dendro DPS in Fontaine, and he is the only one in the game alongside Alhaitham, so I'd say there is definitely potential for him to get power crept. So I'd say Tighnari can easily fall down in the C tier, but for now I feel like he can be in the B tier. But moving on, we have Tighnari's partner in crime, Cyno, and unfortunately for Cyno, I am going to put him in the C tier. He is just a slight upgrade to Keqing. His main problem is that, you know, he wants a lot of limited 5-stars. I'm pretty sure his best team is something like Baiju, Nahida, Farina, or like Fischl, Farina, and then Nahida or Baiju. It's pretty expensive as a team, and I feel like other teams will just give you better results. Again, there are better Electro DPS in the game like Clarin and Raiden, so yeah, I would personally put Cyno in the C tier, unfortunately, which really sucks because he had a lot of potential, but just because of the way his game plays, his long rotations, sometimes he can struggle to clear waves if you clear one out too fast and don't have Dendro applied. So yeah, Cyno can just be a bit annoying to play, reliant on 5-star teammates, so yeah, I'm gonna put him in the C tier for the time being. But next up, we have the other version 3.1 character, and that is Nilo, who I'm actually going to put in the A tier. Now, Nilo is a bit of a funny one. You know, some people consider her a sub-DPS, some people consider her a DPS. Just for the sake of this tier list, I'm going to consider her as a DPS. Now, obviously, you know, she can be a bit easy to build. You really just want, like, HP EM on her. You don't need crit as much as other characters. The thing is, she does kind of want Nahida. Nahida makes her a lot or at least feel a lot better to play. Although technically she isn't entirely reliant on her, but Nahida does definitely make it nicer to play. But honestly, from there you can just throw in any Hydra or Dendro unit for survivability and to trigger more blooms. That is the nice thing about Nilo. You know, basically every time that a Hydra or a Dendro unit comes out, you know, you probably can somewhat play them in a Nilo team. You know, you can just run her with something like Kirara or Yao Yao and then just throw in like a Xingqiu and you will have a decent bloom team. So yeah. And the thing is, the bloom team has a lot of damage, especially in AoE. Like, Nilo in AoE is very strong, which is actually kind of underrated because we have more single target units than AoE units, I would argue, in the game. So yeah, I'm going to put Nilo in the A tier just because of how strong she can be. But next up, we have Wanderer, another Anemo DPS, and honestly, I'm just going to put Wanderer in the B tier as well. I feel like whereas Zhao can be the strongest AoE DPS in the game, Wanderer just doesn't have his own specialty. He is just an overall decent Anemo DPS, nothing special, does kind of rely on C6 Firezon a fair bit. You also really want to run a shielder with him. Obviously, he does have Widsith, which is nice for all Catalyst units, but yeah, the kind of reliance on C6 Firezon and also a shielder can kind of get in the way of Wanderer. Otherwise, you will be stuck having to deal with one of the most annoying animations in the game. So yeah, I'm gonna put Wanderer in the B tier for now. I really don't feel like you need Anemo DPS similar to how you don't really need Geo or Cryo DPS nowadays. And honestly, I feel like Zhao just is the slightly better character. But next up, we have our first limited Dendro DPS, and he is going to be the first S tier on our list. Alhaitham is incredibly strong, especially in single target. His mirrors can hit multiple enemies as well, so he does have a bit of AoE, albeit not as much as other characters. You do kind of need them to be grouped up, but it is more than a character like Hu Tao. And honestly, the best thing about Alhaitham is just how free-to-play friendly his teams are. I mean, Hyperloom teams are very affordable. One of his most free-to-play teams is Xingqiu alongside Yao Yao for Battery, as well as Cookie, where you have a lot of survivability because you have two characters healing your on-fielder as well as Xingqiu giving you damage reduction, and then you have Alhaitham's damage as well as Hyperloon damage. You can run Yayo on Deepwood to get Dendro Red Shred. It's just such a good team with so much quality of life, and it's all 4 stars other than Alhaitham. And then you can also run him on Iron Sting, which is a very good weapon for him because he does want a lot of elemental mastery. So yeah, I'd say Alhaitham is a very good character for F2Ps, and then, you know, if you pull like a Nahida, he gets better. If you pull a Baiju, he gets better. If you pull a Cookie, he gets better. So, you know, he just has a lot of upgrade potential with just one 5-star. And Cookie is always going to be a mainstay in those Hyperloom teams, so you're never going to need all limited 5-stars. And Nahida and Frina are also widely owned, so I wouldn't want to take that away from him. So yeah, I'd say Alhaitham definitely is an S-tier character when it comes to being, you know, easy to gear up, affordable teammates, and just the sheer amount of damage he can do even at C0 R0. But next up, we do have Linny. Now, Linny is a tricky one. You can put him in A tier. I know some people would, but honestly, I'm going to put him right at the top of B tier just because I would personally rate Hu Tao a bit higher than him. I don't want too many power DPS in the S and A tiers, so I am going to put him in the B tier personally. You know, you can say he is a bit restrictive in that he really wants to be played with 3 pyro units, so, you know, mono pyro isn't going to be as loose as other teams. However, you know, there are quite a lot of variants you can go for in that team. You can go for Bennett Changling, which is the classic, or if you want a shielder, you could go for like Bennett Toma and then run an Anemo unit for VV. But yeah, I'm just going to put Linny in the B tier. He does have very good damage, but I feel like it might just be a bit better investing into a character like Hu Tao or Arlecchino, personally speaking. But next up, we have the one and only main man, the icon of 5-star DPS in the game. It's Neuvillette. Where else is he going to go other than the S tier? Run him with Frina. He is easily the strongest unit in the game. Even run him with, you do also have the Hyperloom variants with him, you know, where you can run him with like Nahida, Cookie, and then just any shielder, especially if they differ from one of Hydro or Dendro or Electro. You know, run like a Zhongli, run a Diona to get him 3 stacks, and he will do very decent damage on top of Hyperloom damage. You know, he's very easy to play, good in both AoE single target, just because of how his charge attack works. So yeah, I would definitely put Neuvillette in the S tier. Even if you want to play him in a hyper carry, you can just run like Sucrose/Kaza plus Fischl plus a shielder, and he will get the job done very much. So just because of how easy he is to play, also Prototype Amber is very good on him, so he's also easy to build, easy to play, team variance, AoE single target, big damage. He is just the S tier DPS, no questions asked. But next up, we have Navia. Whilst Ito might have been the strongest Geo DPS of yesterday, Navia is the strongest Geo DPS of today. So I am going to be putting Navia in the A tier. She has way more team flexibility than Ito. You can run her especially in double pyro teams or double hydro teams, and then you can just slot in any other Geo with her. Zhongli for comfort, maybe a Chiori, maybe an Albedo. Depends on what you want to do. So yeah, I'd say Navia is definitely an A-tier character. She can deal a lot of damage. I'd say maybe her one drawback is that she doesn't have a perfect Geo character to pair with yet, and also her weapon options aren't the best for F2Ps. You don't have like a White Tassel or an EM weapon or something like that for her. You probably will be running one of either the event weapon, which if you don't have, unlucky rubber ducky. Otherwise, you're forced to run something like Black Cliff or the Fontaine Craftable, which aren't perfect on her, but can get the job done. So, yeah, Navia is definitely an A-tier character for me. But anyway, moving on to our penultimate character, we have Arlecchino, who I am once again putting in the S tier. For me, she is the best power DPS in the game, especially for F2Ps. I mean, you can run White Tassel on her, a very decent weapon. And you have so many team options with her, way more than you do for the likes of Linny or Hu Tao. You can run her in Mono Pyro, Vape, Overload, Over Vape, even in Reverse Freeze if you're an F2P and you really want to play Kaya and Rosaria. So yeah, she just has so many team variants. She can deal a lot of damage in them. You don't necessarily need a shielder on her, because although it would be nice not to get interruption resistance, she can heal herself, which is nice. So, you can go EQE, fuel up Bennett, which is why she's so strong in Mono Pyro, just because she is the easiest battery for Shangling. Me personally, I love the Mono Pyro team comp with her. If you're in single target, if you're scared about interruption resistance, you can just play like a Tomo or something. Otherwise, you can just run a Sucrose or a Kazuha and just deal insane damage in Mono Pyro teams. And then obviously Vape teams will be very strong, as well as Overload teams with like Fischl, Beidou, and Chivalrys, which are 3-4 stars, and you don't even need Chivalrys C6 technically to make it a decent team. So yeah, I definitely put Arlecchino in the S tier just because she's easy to build, a lot of team flexibility, very strong unit, good in single target. If you can run a grouper with her, also very good in AoE. So yeah, for me, undoubtedly the three strongest characters, even at F2P levels, will be Neuvillette, Alhaitham, and Arlecchino. But finally, our final DPS today, we have Clorinde, and I am going to be putting Clorinde in the A tier. Very strong electro DPS, strongest in my opinion. Run her with a Nahida and you will have danger application with Daze. If you're in single target, which is where she excels at, you can just run like a Baiju or a Emily if you don't own Nahida for whatever reason. You can even run a Dendro Traveler or a Kole in single target. They will definitely get the job done. Honestly, her most important partner is honestly just having Fischl, who you don't need C6, but if you do, that's just a good bonus. So yeah, I'd say Clorinde, very good. Also, her last slot is pretty flexible. Sucrose is actually very strong. You can also run Farina though, although I actually think Sucrose is a bit stronger than Farina. And then obviously Kazuha would be the premium one, which would make her even better in AoE as well. So yeah, Clorinde has a lot of upgrade potential when it comes to her teams. She can make very good use of the Fontaine Craftable. She's easy to build, gives herself 20 crit rate as well as crit ascension. If you run her with Farina, you can even run her on Marechaussee, which is just an insane amount of crit rate, but I honestly don't think you need it. So yeah, Clorinde, easy to build, very strong, premium electro DPS, good team variety. But yeah, that's basically it for my ranking. Now you might be wondering, what does this list mean? Now, in my opinion, if you want to pull a character, you're best off putting characters in the S and the A tier. Obviously the S tier are the strongest, but the A tiers are very viable as well. When it comes to the B tier, they're okay characters. There are better characters to pull, but if you really like them, you can. You just need to be prepared to invest into them if you want to make them work better. And then the C tier are characters I wouldn't really recommend, but if you really like them, you can go for them. You probably might want to pull for them after you're able to face 6-star Spiral Abyss, and they are going to need a lot more work put into them. And then if you want to main Kaching Oakley, you do you. I'm sure you're probably already an endgame player if you are, but yeah, that's basically it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Be sure to comment, leave your tier list down below. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Who would you put higher? Who would you put lower? I welcome any and all friendly discussion. I will try my best to respond to every single comment, which I did when I did the Honkai Star Rail version of this. But yeah, that being said, be sure to like and subscribe. We are closing in on 1,000 subscribers. We're basically at 850, so any and all support would be appreciated. With that being said, hopefully I see you guys next time, and see ya.